What if I told you there was a quarterback so naturally gifted, so physically talented, that he could have been mentioned alongside the all-time greats, but he just didn't care enough to get there? That quarterback was Jay Cutler, a guy with one of the strongest arms the NFL had ever seen, yet somehow became more famous for looking like he'd rather be anywhere else than on a football field. Teammates called him a terrible leader, coaches vented about him to the media. But did Jay Cutler really not care? Or was he just misunderstood? To understand how he became the NFL's most polarizing figure, we're gonna have to go back to his college days. When Jay Cutler arrived at Vanderbilt in 2002, the Commodores were not a football powerhouse. This was the SEC, where programs like Alabama, Florida, and Tennessee dominated. And Vanderbilt was sending future doctors and lawyers onto the field to get demolished by future NFL stars. But Cutler, he had an arm that could change that. After redshirting his first year, Cutler took over as a starter and immediately turned heads. Not because he was leading Vanderbilt to championships, the team finished with just 11 wins during his 4 years there, but because of how he threw the football. Cutler was naturally gifted, with arm strength that was off the charts. The kid didn't even look like he was trying, and the ball was exploding off his hands. He was insanely talented, but he didn't have a rah-rah personality. He didn't get overly hyped after big wins, or overly upset after devastating losses. He kind of just existed. He threw absolute dimes, then walked to the sideline with the same expression he'd have waiting in line at the DMV. By his senior year in 2005, Cutler had shattered every passing record in Vanderbilt history and firmly established himself as a first-round talent. But heading into the 2006 NFL draft, Cutler had a problem. The competition. The 2006 quarterback class was loaded. Vince Young had just led Texas to a national championship. Matt Leinart had won a Heisman at USC. Both were proven winners who piled up massive win totals in college. And then there was Jay Cutler from Vanderbilt. No championships, no Heisman, just 11 wins in 4 years. But that arm. At the combine, Cutler's physical tools had scouts drooling. 6'3", 233 pounds, a 4.77 40-yard dash, and arm strength that was off the charts. He could make every throw on the field and make them look effortless. But scouts also identified warning signs during their psychological assessments. While his mental quickness score was elite, his self-confidence measured average when it should have been through the roof for a franchise quarterback, and his focus and social maturity scores were worrisome. Young and Leinart were winners. They led their team to championships. They had the clutch gene. Cutler had the strongest arm in the draft, but he'd never won anything. And something about his demeanor made scouts wonder if he had that fire, that competitive obsession that separates good quarterbacks from great ones. On draft day, Vince Young went 3rd overall to the Titans. Matt Leinart went 10th to the Cardinals. And then the Denver Broncos made their move, trading up to the 11th overall pick to select Jay Cutler. There was one small problem. Denver already had a quarterback, Jake Plummer, who had taken them to the AFC Championship just months earlier. So Denver's plan was to let Plummer play out the 2006 season while Cutler learned from the bench. And that's exactly what happened, for about 13 weeks. Through the first part of the season, Plummer played well enough, and the Broncos were 7-4. But then in week 13, head coach Mike Shanahan made the controversial decision to bench Plummer and start Cutler. Cutler's first NFL start came against the Seahawks, and it was pretty rough. He completed just 47% of his passes for 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a fumble. Not great, but Shanahan stuck with him, and over the next few weeks, you could see flashes of why Denver drafted him. In the 5 games he started his rookie year, Cutler went 2-3, threw for over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Not spectacular numbers, but the potential was obvious. Heading into 2007, Jay Cutler was Denver's unquestioned starting quarterback. This was supposed to be his breakout year, the year he proved the Broncos were right to trade up for him. And on paper, it looked solid. Cutler threw for 3,400 yards and 20 touchdowns, with just 14 interceptions. The Broncos went 7-9, but for a second-year quarterback, those were respectable numbers. But something was off. Throughout the season, Cutler just didn't look right. His velocity was down. He lost 35 pounds, dropping from 233 to under 200. Teammates noticed he was exhausted all the time. Coaches couldn't figure out why his arm strength, his biggest asset, seemed diminished. Cutler himself knew something was wrong, but he just kept playing through it. After the season, Cutler finally got a diagnosis. type 1 diabetes. His body had essentially been shutting down throughout the entirety of the 2007 season. The weight loss, the fatigue, the decreased arm strength, it all made sense now. As some of you guys know, these videos take forever to edit. And when I'm not sitting at my desk working on content, I'm either playing soccer or lifting at the gym. So honestly, I don't have much time to cook. That's why Tempo, the sponsor of today's video, has been a huge game changer for me. They deliver fresh, fully prepared meals right to your door. And the best part, they cook in just 2 minutes. Seriously, that's faster than deciding what to order in. Tempo's menu is dietitian approved and packaged with real ingredients you'd find in your own kitchen. And being as active as I am, I'm always trying to hit my protein goals. Tempo makes that super easy with their protein-packed meal options. And they actually taste good, which is huge. Their rotating menu has over 20 mindful choices. So whether you need a calorie-conscious, carb-conscious, fiber-rich, or protein-packed option like me, they've got you covered. These nutrient-rich meals help me maintain a balanced lifestyle without spending hours on meal prep. So if you want to save time and still eat right, head to the link in the description or click this QR code and use code SGS60 to get 60% off your first Tempo box. Once Cutler got on the proper treatment and insulin regime, he gained back the weight, his energy returned, and most importantly, that cannon arm came back with it. When the 2008 season arrived, Jay Cutler finally showed the world what he could do when he was truly healthy. He started the season on fire, torching the Raiders for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. Then the next week, he cranked it up even more, throwing for 350 yards and 4 scores in a win over the Chargers. Not long after, Cutler had his breakout moment, dropping a career-high 447 yards on the Browns. That year, he was one of the best quarterbacks in football, throwing for a total of 4,500 yards, 28 touchdowns, 18 interceptions, and made the Pro Bowl for the first time in his career. But even during his best season, there was something about Jay Cutler that felt different. While other elite quarterbacks were pumping up their teammates, yelling on the sidelines, and showing emotion, Cutler looked like he was bored. He threw a 50-yard touchdown, and his celebration was basically a slight head nod. He threw a back-breaking interception, and he jogged to the sideline with the same exact expression. He didn't act the way people expected a franchise quarterback to. Despite the individual success, the Browns finished 8-8 and missed the playoffs again. And then everything fell apart. After the 2008 season, head coach Mike Shanahan was fired, a move that didn't sit well with Jay Cutler. He was frustrated with the decision, and even more upset that it meant losing his quarterback's coach, Jeremy Bates, the man who had developed him. The Broncos then hired 32-year-old wonderkin Josh McDaniels as their new head coach, who had just come off a successful run as the Patriots' offensive coordinator. A few days after he was hired, McDaniels called Cutler and his agent in for a closed-door meeting. McDaniels reportedly started the conversation with a bizarre 20-minute rundown of his own resume, listing all of his accomplishments and experience. Then he flipped the script, going off on Cutler's play, yelling and cursing as he tore into him. Cutler sat through it for a while, then finally got up and left with his agent. As they left the building, Jay turned to him and said, "Get me out of here. I don't care how you do it." It was clear McDaniels didn't want Cutler as his quarterback. He was already trying to trade for his backup in New England, Matt Castle. So that April, the Broncos made it official. They shipped Jay Cutler to the Chicago Bears in exchange for Kyle Orton, 2 first-round picks, and a 3rd-rounder. It was one of the most dramatic quarterback divorces in recent NFL history, and Cutler was heading to Chicago, a city that would either love him or destroy him. Spoiler alert, it was option 2. When Jay Cutler arrived in Chicago, expectations were sky high. The Bears had been desperate for a franchise quarterback for decades, and now they finally had one, a Pro Bowl quarterback with a cannon for an arm. But his first game with the team was an absolute disaster. Versus the Packers, he completed just 47% of his passes for 277 yards, 1 touchdown, and 4 interceptions. As the season went on, Cutler's play was up and down. He finished the year with 3,600 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, and a league-leading 26 interceptions. And here's where the gunslinger mentality started to show. Cutler had supreme confidence in his arm, and that meant he'd try to fit the ball into windows that simply didn't exist. He'd see a receiver running a route, and even if there were 2 defenders in the way, he'd think, Yeah, I could fit it in there. Sometimes he could, and those throws were spectacular. But a lot of times he couldn't, and those throws turned into interceptions. The Bears went 7-9 and missed the playoffs, but they had one of the best defenses in football. If Cutler could just take care of the ball, this team could compete. The 2010 season was supposed to be the year everything came together, and for a while, it looked like it would be. The Bears went 11-5 with their defense carrying them to the NFC North title. Cutler threw for 3,274 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 16 interceptions. His numbers weren't spectacular, but they were efficient enough. In the divisional round, the Bears demolished the Seahawks. Cutler scored 4 total touchdowns and looked confident. Chicago was now just 1 win away from a trip to the Super Bowl. But then came the moment that defined Jay Cutler's career. The NFC Championship game against the Green Bay Packers. At halftime, with the Bears trailing 14-0, the medical staff examined Cutler's knee. He came out for the first series of the third quarter, but after that drive stalled, Cutler walked to the sideline and never went back in. For the rest of the game, he just stood there, that same blank expression on his face, not coaching up his backup Caleb Haney, not trying to rally his teammates. He was just there. The Bears never announced what his injury was. They just said his knee was banged up and he couldn't continue. No crutches, no brace, no major limp, just Cutler on the sideline looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. People at home weren't buying it, and social media exploded, saying he didn't look hurt, he looked like he quit on his team. And then his fellow NFL players started piling on. Derek Brooks said, "Hey, there is no medicine for a guy with no guts and heart." Deion Sanders tweeted, "Folks, I never question a player's injury, but I do question a player's heart." Darnell Dockett said, "If I'm on Chicago team, Jay Cutler has to wait till me and the team shower, get dressed, and leave before he comes in the locker room." The narrative was set instantly. Jay Cutler quit on his team in the NFC Championship game. But that wasn't actually the truth. After the game, Bears head coach Lovie Smith said he was the one who decided to bench Cutler after consulting with the team's medical staff. And the following day, an MRI revealed that the quarterback had actually suffered a grade 2 MCL sprain. The following season, 2011, was a disaster. The Bears started 7-3, but Cutler broke his thumb in week 10 and missed the rest of the season. He threw for 2,300 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. Once again, the narrative was Cutler couldn't stay healthy. And when he was healthy, he was turning the ball over too much. After a disappointing end to the 2011 season, the Bears entered 2012 with something to prove. And for the first half of the season, they looked unstoppable. The Bears started the year 7-1. The defense was elite, the offense was clicking, and Chicago looked like a legitimate Super Bowl contender. This was finally the year Jay Cutler would silence all the doubters and lead the Bears to a championship. But then, like it always seemed to go with Jay Cutler's Bears, everything fell apart. Chicago lost 5 of their last 8 games. The offense sputtered, the magic disappeared, Cutler was getting criticized again for his body language, his apparent lack of emotion, and his indifferent sideline demeanor. And that's when the internet immortalized him. That 2012 season, a Tumblr blog called Smokin' Jay Cutler launched. The concept was simple. Take photos of Jay Cutler looking bored, frustrated, or completely checked out on the field, and Photoshop a cigarette into his mouth. It was perfect, because if there was one thing Jay Cutler excelled at, it was looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. Despite finishing 10-6, a record that would have made the postseason in most years, the Bears missed the postseason entirely. Cutler finished the year with 3,000 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. Not the kind of numbers you want from your franchise quarterback. As a result of the season ending in crushing disappointment, the Bears fired head coach Lovie Smith and hired Mark Trestman as his replacement. New head coach Mark Trestman installed a more quarterback-friendly system, and Cutler thrived. For the first time in his Chicago career, Cutler wasn't being carried by his defense. This time, he was the one doing the carrying. Well, when he was healthy at least. Cutler missed 5 games in 2013 due to injuries, and backup Josh McCown came in and played out of his mind. McCown went 3-2 as a starter and threw 13 touchdowns to just 1 interception during that stretch. He looked so good that the Chicago media, fans, and even some of his teammates started asking the question, Should Josh McCown be the full-time starter? When Cutler got healthy, he was named the starter once again, and it caused some controversy. But the offense was too good as a whole that season for it to be a major talking point. Wide receivers Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey both had over 1,000 receiving yards. Running back Matt Forte was a dual threat weapon. The offense was explosive, ranking second in total points scored. Cutler threw for 3,812 yards, 19 touchdowns, and just 12 interceptions. But here's the problem. The defense completely fell apart. After years of being elite, the Bears defense allowed the second most points in the league in 2013. They couldn't stop anyone, games turned into shootouts, and Chicago kept losing close ones. So even though Cutler played some of the best, most disciplined football of his career, the Bears went 8-8 and missed the playoffs. After his solid 2013 season, the Bears rewarded Cutler with a massive 7-year, $126 million extension, making him one of the highest paid players in the league. Chicago was committed to him for better or worse, and many around the league thought it was a mistake. And it turns out, they were right. The 2014 season was a disaster for the Bears. They went 5-11, their locker room was fractured, and at the center of it all was Jay Cutler, who looked more disinterested than ever. His leadership, or lack therefore, became a constant topic of conversation. And then things got worse. The Bears' own offensive coordinator anonymously went to NFL Network's Ian Rappaport to trash his quarterback. The guy who was supposed to be designing plays for him, working with him every day, went to the media anonymously to criticize his play and decision-making. That's how toxic things had become in Chicago. In Week 15, after Cutler threw 3 interceptions against the Saints, head coach Mark Trestman had seen enough. He benched his $126 million quarterback in favor of Jimmy Clausen. Clausen got injured in his first start, which forced Cutler back into the starting role for the final game of the season. After the season ended, the Bears cleaned house. So the entire regime that had given Cutler that massive contract extension was gone. But Cutler, he was still there, still starting, still making $126 million. Because when you give a quarterback that much guaranteed money, you can't just cut him. You're stuck. And Chicago was very, very stuck with Jay Cutler. Heading into 2014, the Bears hired defensive-minded coach John Fox, and everyone expected a more conservative, ball-controlled offense. That should have been good for Cutler, right? Less gunslinging, more safe throws. And honestly, Cutler had a pretty solid season statistically, throwing for 3,600 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. But here's the problem. The Bears went 6-10. Even when Cutler played well, it didn't translate to wins. Nobody in Chicago cared about his stats anymore. They were all just exhausted by the Jay Cutler experience. Heading into 2016, everyone knew Jay Cutler's time in Chicago was running out. In Week 2 against the Eagles, Cutler hurt his thumb and was placed on injured reserve. It looked like his season, and possibly his Bears career, was over. But in Week 8, Cutler was activated and returned to the starting lineup. The magic, if there was ever any, was completely gone. He then went down with a labrum injury in Week 11. That ended his season and his tenure with the Bears. After the 2016 season ended, Chicago released Jay Cutler. He was 33 years old, and it looked like his career was over. And Cutler was perfectly fine with that. He was ready to move on and announce his retirement. But then Adam Gase called. Gase, who'd been Cutler's offensive coordinator in Chicago, was now the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. And his starter, Ryan Tannehill, had just torn his ACL in training camp. Gase needed a quarterback, and he wanted Cutler. So in August 2017, Jay Cutler unretired and signed a 1-year deal with the Dolphins. And it went exactly how you'd expect a Jay Cutler comeback to go. Cutler threw for 2,666 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. Miami went 6-10, he looked rusty, slow, and somehow even less interested than usual. But the 2017 season gave us one final, perfect Jay Cutler moment. In a game against the Saints, the Dolphins ran a trick play where Cutler lined up as a wide receiver. I use the word lined up loosely because Cutler just stood there with his hands on his hips. He didn't even try to sell that he was going to run a route. It was the most Jay Cutler moment possible, and after that season, he retired for good. Jay Cutler definitely had his frustrating moments, but he was far from the worst quarterback to ever play in the NFL. If you do want to know the story of the worst quarterback to ever play in the NFL, check out this video up here.